When we look at all these things, the Eucharist is an expression of God's desire for our good. God takes the initiative to give Himself to us in the Eucharist for us to be good, for us to be saved, for us to experience the fullness of His divine life. Hello, this is Father Sadi, and welcome to another dose of Holy. We are now on the seventh episode of the series on the Eucharist. On this episode, I'd like to particularly celebrate with you this beautiful solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus that we celebrate today in the entire Universal Church. The Sacred Heart of Jesus has been venerated. It's been the center and the heart of the devotion of Catholics and Christians around the world since the Sacred Heart of Jesus in the Sacred Heart appeared to Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque in France in 1673 to 1675. In those 2 years of the revelation of the Sacred Heart of Jesus to Margaret Mary Alacoque, and then after that, the many men and women, the holy saints of the Church through the centuries that have perpetuated the devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And so today, the Church continues to deepen this devotion to the Sacred Heart. Why is the Sacred Heart such a powerful devotion for the Church? First of all, it's because Jesus manifests to us truly one of the best ways to understand God's nature, and that is that God is love. And so the Sacred Heart of Jesus tells us how much God loves us. And there are many ways by which this can be expressed in the Church, or this can be understood in the Church through the many aspects of the tradition. But I would like to focus today on the relationship of that expression of God's divine love for His people through the Holy Eucharist. I mean, when you look into the scriptures, you will find some landmarks of how Jesus alluded, if not clearly showed us or taught us, divine love, the divine love of God. Among them would be when Jesus was in his public ministry, was going from one town to another, and people were following him from one village to another. And then he took a boat, and then by the time he arrived in another village, he saw the people on the shore longing for him, looking for him, asking for him, and bringing the sick and those who were weighed down by demonic possessions and stuff like that. And Jesus saw the crowd, and according to the scriptures, he saw them and he was moved with compassion for them because they looked like sheep without a shepherd. That is divine love. That is divine love, being able to see the people in need of him, and he, as God in Jesus Christ, is making himself available to them through his public ministry, healing the sick, making the blind see, making the lame walk, freeing those who are possessed with the demons, and many other miracles that he has done along the way, including resuscitating the dead back to life. So this is one of them. And then the other one that I find very much clearly alluding to the Sacred Heart is when Jesus speaks to the people and says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This is a very, very, very beautiful passage. Of course, it's a longer passage than what I said, but this particular passage reminds us of the heart of God in Jesus Christ being poured out. And the way that it's being poured out is through an invitation, to give him our burdens, our pains, our sorrows, our troubles, our sickness, our sufferings, pretty much. And that to lay all these down, all the things that burden us upon the shoulder of God, to give him all the things that trouble us so that we may find rest for ourselves, because his burden is light. God's burden is light. He can take it. He can bear the burden for us. This is a beautiful rendition of the love of God in Jesus Christ. It tells us of the dimension of service and availability on the part of God for His people. I mean, it's really truly within the nature of God to love, and therefore God cannot but have a concern for us and desire for our good. And perhaps for me, as far as the many other places in the scripture we find this, of course, at the very story and narrative of the passion of Jesus, from the moment that he was captured all the way to the cross, where he was flagellated. He had to carry the cross, he had to be spat on along the way and humiliated along the way. And by the time he arrived in Golgotha, they had to nail him to the cross, and crowned with thorns, hung on the cross between heaven and earth, and to die for us, right? And in the text of today's gospel, we see that the one of the soldiers would pierce the side of Jesus and the heart of Jesus, and the blood and water would flow from the pierced side of Jesus. This is divine mercy. This is sacred love of God manifest to us in the ultimate self-giving of God in Jesus Christ. God gave Himself, the fullness of who He is, to us in order that we may be saved, that we may be redeemed, that we may understand God's pardon. That God's pardon is a passion for each one of us, not in a generic way, but in each one of us in a personal way. He calls us by name in that passion and love for us. So that's very, very special today in the celebration of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Mind you, all of that can take us back to the Eucharist. And makes Himself available to us as food for our journey, for our well-being. This is divine love. And so when we receive the Eucharist, we cannot help but acknowledge and recognize that God is loving us as He desires us to be part of His divine life whenever we receive His precious body and blood. So this is the heart of divine love, right? That God makes Himself available to us in Jesus Christ in the form of food and drink. It's like God coming to the very depth of our humanity and hungering for us. And the way He hungers for us is by giving Himself to us as food, so that we may be part of His divine life. So when we look at all these things, the Eucharist is an expression of God's desire for our good. God takes the initiative to give Himself to us in the Eucharist for us to be good, for us to be saved, for us to experience the fullness of His divine life. So, yes, the Eucharist is one of the greatest expressions of God's self-giving. That here, take me, receive me in your body as food and drink, that you may be sanctified, made holy, that you may experience that with me in you, in the temple of your body, that you are well, you are protected, you are good. Imagine that, right? So that is a very, very concrete way that God constantly reminds us of how much He loves us by giving Himself to us in Jesus in the Holy Eucharist. And so we are constantly being made aware of divine love whenever we receive the body and blood of Christ. There's actually this book pertaining to the different ways by which love is expressed. Love is manifest through time, through service, through acts of kindness or acts of love, through words of encouragement and words of love and affection, and then of course also love in the form of physical touch, touching, hugging, kissing. Those are all different ways by which love can be expressed. And I think that divine love of God has covered all of these bases. And I think the Eucharist as an expression of love is both the giving, the gifting. God is expressed to us through the gifting that His divine love does in the Eucharist. So actually, for me, I connected that a lot because I know when I studied this ways of expressions of love, I know that two of the things that are very clear for me for my love language are giving and acts of service. So it's very obvious that that is what the Eucharist is all about: to be giving us His body and blood as gift for everlasting life. So let us continue to gather together in the Eucharist. The Eucharist, my dear church, is a response to God's love and self-giving to us. And the Eucharist, which is derived from the Greek word Eucharisto, which means thanksgiving or thank you, is as a word that pretty much sums up in a way the proper response of all of us to that divine love. As God looks after our good, as God offers Himself and gives Himself to us in the Eucharist, our proper response is the Eucharist itself, the gathering of God's people in thanksgiving for the gifts that have been poured out to us by God's generous self-giving. So today, on the feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, I pray that you will experience the fullness of Christ's love as you partake of the Eucharist, and I pray that in the smallest realities of the of your everyday life, that you will never ever doubt, the fullness of God's love available to us in all circumstances of human life, and sometimes even in the midst of our suffering and pain. So may the Lord bless you today to be holy, happy, and healthy. And this is Father Sunny as we finish this episode of the Eucharist series. And this is your dose of holy today. Until next time, God bless you.